actually been part of in churches, and particularly if you've journeyed alongside churches through this journey, some of the issues that they've faced and or you've observed that have been challenging in that area. But we might put just a short biblical reflection up first, and then just have a quick catch up with each other. So I'll just pull this around. You've probably picked up by now that my all-time favourite biblical passage for church consulting is Ephesians chapter 4. I think I talk about this pretty well every time I'm with anybody. So here's just chapter 4, Ephesians 4, and verses 20 through to 24. This is personal transformation, transition, change for people. But it has the three key elements that we'll go through with change theory today. So most of you are aware the classic book on change. Anybody know it? About the year 2000, late 1990s, early 2000. It was a book that changed the kind of thinking around management and transition for just about everybody, and it's still probably the classic. Anybody know the book? William Bridges? No? Okay. It's called Change and Transition by William Bridges. It's still considered the classic text on change management. And he was the first one to identify that change is an event, transition is the psychological process that people experience. And so he talks about here the three stages of effective change is saying goodbye to the past, moving into what he calls a neutral transitional zone in which people have to do some rethinking around how they're going to be different in the future, and then the actual embrace of the new. And he talks about the different leadership styles that are required in all three. And as I've thought about that, I've often come back to this passage where Paul says here, verse 22, you were taught with regard to the past, up here, hardened hearts, lost in sensuality, indulging in impurity, full of greed. This is not the way of Jesus. This is the past life that you had. When you heard about Jesus, you were taught three things. You actually have to let go of the past. With regard to your former way of life, intentionally put off the old, put off the past. Get rid of it, because it's actually on a trajectory of destruction. It's in trouble. Now, that's not always the case in every situation, but usually we change for a reason. There's a problem with the past. Be made new in the attitude of your minds. And notice here that is a internal change. It's not the new behaviour. The new behaviour comes on top of the internal transformation that takes place. So verse 22, be made new in the attitude of your minds. In other words, some new thinking, some new thoughts, some new ways of approaching things. And then to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. And then he goes on, and there's seven, I think we've actually might have been through this before, the seven key instructions at the end of the chapter around how we live in a fresh and a new way. So he talks here about integrity in our language and communication, dealing with our emotions wisely and well, working hard, so we've got something to share with those in need, watching our language, being responsive to the Holy Spirit, getting rid of the bitterness, the rage, the anger, and having kindness and compassion, forgiveness. Again, just as in Christ God forgave you, which kind of matches here, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness up there. So a fair bit of today is going to be talking about the three key activities. How do we let go of the past, and what's the appropriate ways to do that, to acknowledge what's wrong, celebrate not that there's much celebration in here, but to celebrate in many churches the good things about the past, then to enter the transitional zone, which is to help people rethink, get their head around a new way of operating, and then to embed or put in place the new ways, the new things that need to shift and change in here. And I just find it interesting that even here in the scriptures, you've actually got all those exact same things at the personal transformational level, not just the corporate organisational level. So just comment, any reflection just on that as we kick in for the day? That's the journey we're going to be on over the course of today, organisationally. So, just to anchor our thinking scripturally, any thoughts, reflections on that?
Important to do the transition stuff work.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I think I see lots of people and organisations, churches, only wanting to do that third step.
Yeah.
Or that third step.
Absolutely.
They're
Yep.
only doing 1 and 2 because
Yes.
they want to get to 3.
Yeah, that's right.
They don't do 1 and 2 as, I don't
Yeah.
think they see those as important
Yeah.
stages
Yeah.
of themselves.
Yeah.
There are only prerequisites to tick off before we get to 3.
Yeah, I think it's a very fair comment. Bridges actually says in his reflections on this that your ability to do 3 is dependent on the successfulness of 1 and 2. And I would actually say that. I see a lot of pastors who basically, once they've decided for the change, everything is invested in the change, and there's no real recognition of the need to actually clearly and carefully deal with the past in an appropriate way and spend a little bit of time in the transitional process.
They want to move forward.
Yeah.
One pastor who's finishing and wants to set up the strategy and consultancy for the future, so it'll be all sorted for when he leaves.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, you need to finish well and
Yeah.
leave that to, you're not going to be part of that future, so
Yeah.
you've got to control that
Yeah.
and to work through those stages.
Mm.
But yeah, they want to move on.
Yeah. So I've spent 2 days this week with a pastor and his wife that are right in the middle of that. A couple of weeks ago they finished. So I was actually involved in coaching them through finishing well. So they had their last Sunday in their church a little while ago. They're now in the transitional zone, and they start a new ministry on the, I think the 2nd or 3rd of January. And so they've actually deliberately taken a transitional zone just to be able to fully let go before they start into the next thing. And it's a great thing to be doing. Any other observations just on this journey? Because we'll be thinking a fair bit about transitional elements today.
I'm encouraged by how it validates the consultant's role. You were taught.
Yes, that's right.
To your former way of life.
That's right. Yep. Exactly. Yep.
So there needs to be that
Yeah.
element of intentionality.
Absolutely.
Somebody coming alongside to
Yeah.
teach
Yeah.
and enable.
Change is very emotionally draining for everyone involved, and sometimes to have somebody just outside the process is really helpful. So one of the things I said with the guy I've just worked with this week, I'd reminded him that his church, because he's been a much loved pastor for a significant time in the church, that the church emotionally is going to find it very hard to say goodbye to him. So as much as he would love to have a really meaningful farewell that celebrates the life and ministry and the history of the church is not going to organise it for him because they feel that somehow that betrays, the fact. And so I said to him right from the beginning, mate, you're going to have to organise this yourself. And he said, no, I've told my eldership board really clearly exactly what's happening. They're all on board, they want to celebrate, they want to do it. But as the time got closer and closer, they hadn't done anything. Even though they were good people, they had every intention of doing it well. It's just that emotionally, they didn't want to face the reality that this is all happening. And to be planning a meaningful farewell just meant that somehow they felt that they were betraying this. They didn't particularly want him to go, but they all recognised that this was an important step forward. It's conflicted feelings in there. And so he shook his head to me a little while ago. So, I'm going to have to organise this myself. And I said, I did tell you that ahead of time. He had a great farewell. Everybody was right on board. And it went extremely well. But it's difficult emotionally to do. People don't want to go there. And so just working that through. And people don't want to also be in the neutral zone. They want to, sometimes they want the new to come sooner than it's ready. And investing the time appropriately and pastoring people through that process is a very significant part of good change management. Any other observations?
Tim, in the passage there, it speaks about how the old was essentially bad, you know, corrupted,
Yes.
criticised,
Yeah.
things like that. If in the situation that you've just spoken of there, where the pastor was much loved,
Yep.
it doesn't sound like it was a disaster
No.
and you need to get out
Yeah.
smart.
Yeah.
Some of those transitions can be trickier.
Yes.
It's not like this is bad, this
Yeah.
is great.
Yeah.
This is actually pretty good, and
Yeah.
this could be even better.
Yes.
And nuance is even trickier, I think.
Yes.
in transitions.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a fair call. Not all transitions are negative or caused by negative issues. Some of them are what we call a natural developmental transition, which is part of growth. It's part of an ordinary. Some churches, when they transition from, I think we've done a little bit on the church size theory in the past. Some of them, when they transition from what's called a pastoral sized church to a program sized church, is the most painful of the 4 transitions that take place in church growth, because people feel like somehow they've lost that ability for everyone to know and relate to the pastor in the church. Even though it's natural, it's positive, people experience some of the downside of it.
There is no transition in some of the churches because, for example, in the Middle Eastern culture, you cannot leave the church without bringing someone
Yes.
you like
Yes,
and the church likes,
yes,
and you bring him in,
yes,
and everything is okay, and
you
leave.
can, yes,
If you leave without bringing someone, like,
yes,
it's very bad.
yeah.
Sorry?
I like that.
So I think there are cultural elements around that, because I think certainly within some cultures where the pastor is actually perceived more as a parent to the whole congregation, it feels like you're leaving the congregation orphaned without a parent if that transition doesn't occur. But in other congregations, they're quite comfortable to go a period of time without a pastor. And so the one that I did just recently in Victoria, quite a large, so it would be a Baptist church with 800 to 900 people, pastoral team of around 20. And so they were very comfortable and quite intentional about the fact that they felt they had the capacity to manage the church for an 8 to 12 month period while they carefully readjusted things in order to be ready to receive a new pastor. And they did that. And so there are different approaches to that, and I think it depends a little bit on the way that the pastor and the congregation relate together as to how safe people feel with or without a pastor present. Good. Any other just quick reflection around this? Otherwise we'll dive in for our day.
I'm wondering the relevance. We've taken a strategic church-wide decision to transition from program that also does discipleship to a discipleship core that also does program.
Yes, okay.
I've got 10 of us at the moment doing 3DM
Yes,
training.
yes,
We'll roll
yeah.
that way.
Yep.
We're looking at a 5 to 10 year transition is
Mm.
what we're thinking in our
Yes.
heads.
Yeah.
Is it relevant to these sort of principles too? Or is that
Oh, I think so. Yes. Yeah. No, I think taking plenty of time about transition is one of the most significant ways to embed it well. So I'll probably say this 100 times today, so I'll start it now. The biggest danger with transition is that a pastor has been slowly, mentally transitioning in their mind for some years before they even articulate the change and the direction. And so they've got to realise that this has been a slow fermentation process in their heart and mind before they've even been able to articulate what's wrong, what needs to change, the direction they happen. They often then expect other people to do that same transition in a really short period of time and are quite upset with them when they don't get it in the first couple of months of trying to explain it to people, and realising that they fail to realise they've been on this journey for a long time, and they now need to also give it not necessarily the same amount but a reasonable level of time for people to understand and adjust to the transition. So this is kind of embedded in my folklore history. That our church in Tasmania was part of it was a group of very open Brethren churches in Tasmania. They weren't the closed, exclusive type. And back at the turn of the century, last century, 100 years ago, a group of Christian leaders from Melbourne came and went right around all the churches in Tasmania with a movement called the Needed Truth Movement. In other words, you need to do what we tell you to do. And it was all about becoming more, exclusive, more separate from the world, not connecting with other churches and all those other things. And thankfully, the elders in our church actually said to them, how many years of study and reflection have you put into this before coming on this preaching tour around Tasmania? And they said, we've spent 5 years on that. And our elders wisely said to them, give us 5 years to think about it and come back and talk to us and we'll tell you our response. And they never moved into that direction. Many of the other churches did in Tasmania became quite dysfunctional and exclusive. And so it was quite an interesting situation. So that was handed down from father to son, mother to daughter in our church, for years, saying, don't just buy into whatever comes down the track. Do some thinking, some reflection on this. And if they've spent a long time thinking about it, you spend the same amount of time working on it, because not every change is the right change. Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts here? Okay, let's brainstorm just around the issues and the reflections on transition, and then we'll get into our first little bit. We'll give you a little bit of a summary on Bridges' thinking. So here we go. Talk to me about the transitions you've observed, you've seen, what's gone well and why, and where have you seen things go wrong in transitions that have caused pain, unnecessary struggle for people, and sometimes have railroaded the transition off the rails. So let's talk about, first of all, the positives, and then let's get into the things that go wrong. So what have you seen about positive transitions in terms of churches?
Sometimes more people are drawn into the active life of the church. They've become sitting back.
Yep.
Letting the pastor do it all. And when the pastor moves, they do step up.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So it's a way of involving more people. Oops.
Separating discussion from decision, so rather
yes.
than your church business meeting to discuss and to decide, have like forums that run beforehand, things like the growth groups.
Yeah, that's a classic principle. Great, Craig. This is what we call the classic options meeting. Having or the trial, having the options out there where people can actually talk about them, and you've said up in front, we're not making a decision around this. This is a chance just to explore. Let's have an open discussion without attaching this discussion to a decision. And that's a really important principle, to make it safe for people to question, to put ideas out, to throw possibilities around. Great.
Involving an external party, consultant, mediator, perspective.
This is a great time for people such as yourselves to journey with a church through this process, because you can actually, as an objective person, you're sometimes outside of any investment in the old way, the new way, and so to help people just on the process, as an independent person, it's a great gift to a church at this point.
Can that sometimes be negative? I'm just thinking of different situations, like the ones I initially thought of were positive outcomes, but sometimes with certain interim pastoral situations seem to have got churches stuck rather than got
Yes.
going.
Yeah. I think it depends on the way that the external person operates in that situation. If they if they're genuinely there, not to take any position in relation to the past or even in relation to the way the future might unfold, and the objective is to empower people to journey the change. It usually works well, but yes, I think you're right. I have seen it because the independent or objective person does have a lot of power at a time, particularly of when we're in the middle of the transition. And if that power is used unwisely, it can actually block or hold people back. So we'll talk about leadership in the neutral zone later on this afternoon, and I think that's where that comes unstuck. Yeah.
Change and transition is generational handover.
Yeah. Some of these are very tricky processes. Any situation where people have to let go of a role in the life of a church is a difficult transition, and helping people lay those roles down wisely and well is one of the key tasks. And sometimes having an external person to assist with that is actually really very helpful, because when the external person exits the system, they take away with them some of the angst around some of those things, which means a new person can come in and not do that as their first job.
So that positive aspects are dependent on how well it finishes.
Yes, yeah. That's a very true statement. The effort put in to concluding things well is directly proportional to the ease at which the new things start. And so a poor finish that leaves lots of stuff undone, lots of people hurt, lots of people disappointed and disillusioned, just means the whole entry point for a new person coming in, they're behind the 8 ball in terms of trust without starting. So one of the things that we've actually found often with situations that don't have a carefully facilitated interim period, so we've talked about here often, a poor transition sometimes means we have an unintentional interim minister, the next one who comes in. In other words, he meant to stay long or she meant to stay long, but it doesn't happen because there's so much anxiety stuck in the system that it all gets projected onto the next person. And the next person spends, often if they're good, they'll spend a great time mopping up all that anxiety, but it means then that when the anxiety is actually resolved and things have happened, the person has almost lost their ability to lead well because people associate them with the resolution of the past, not with the establishment of the future. So it's one of the reasons when we come to do, next year we'll do a bit of work on recovery for churches. Pastors that come in immediately after a major disaster in a church are often short-term. And the reason is because they end up resolving everything and fixing it. And once everything's fixed, people actually want to say goodbye to the past. And if the person has significantly invested themselves in resolving the past, people actually subconsciously want to say goodbye to that pastor. Does that make sense? It's a strange phenomena, but we've seen it happen time and time again. So one of the things we actually say often to pastors who come in a time of transition, let an external team manage this, and when we say goodbye to the church, they can say farewell to their past story, and say goodbye to us at the same time, and all the time you can be rebuilding things from the inside. So associate yourself with what is new, not with what is past. And it makes a very significant difference.
That's true even when right action has been taken, I've observed. So
absolutely, yes.
I've come into churches where people have gone, yeah, I had to be one of the elders who moved that unpopular motion.
Yes, that's right.
And now I'm carrying that baggage. And
Yes.
I'm going, you did the right thing, everyone can see you did the right
Exactly.
thing. It doesn't matter.
That's
It's
right.
not your baggage.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, it's just part of human nature of goodbyes and hellos, you know, and when we say goodbye to something, there are certain things we need to do to let it go, and sometimes we associate things with that need to go, and it's hard on some leaders, particularly lay leaders in the church, elders and deacons, who get associated with those things.
Part of managing the anxiety and uncouraged process.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Oop. Great. Good, thanks, Frank. Any others you've seen that are positives? That you think that actually this went well. This was a good transitional process. This was effective. People were able to transition significantly and well.
Just when there's a strong sense of thankfulness,
Yeah.
celebration,
Yes.
for the things that have happened before.
Yep. Yeah.
And also strong lamenting, owning,
Yeah.
you know, the pain of the past.
Yes. Yep.
Most of my transition experiences are negative, but the positive that I saw in one of them was the effort that was put into reflecting on what we've become,
Okay.
and hope to be,
Yes.
and
Yep.
therefore that led to a change in the constitution prior to the next pastor coming, so that we
Okay.
had a shape and a form around what we wanted to become.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that was careful reflection around what was going on. That would be a good correlate with positive change. The time taken to understand what needs to change and why it needs to change, and then putting that in place before a new pastorate comes into place. Yep. All right, let's just flick over to, we've probably got our disaster stories on change. So what causes them not to go well on the other side? Where do they come unstuck big time?
Zero planning.
Yeah. Yep. When particularly if a change is attempted to be imposed without attending to the journey of people. So Bridges' big observation, which we'll come to in a moment, is that change is an event, transition is the psychological process, or sometimes the spiritual process. If there's no attending to the spiritual needs, the psychological needs of people in a change event, we're in big trouble. And so knowing how to tend and care for the people, which means planning, and connected to planning is communication. Probably another little rule of thumb that I might pop out today is in times of transition and change, communicate. Talk. Just constantly tell people what's happening, where things are up to, how can they be involved, what can they be doing. Even inviting them to pray along with every moment, every decision. Normally, church leadership and eldership should be communicating far more than they do to congregations, but in times of transition, this becomes absolutely paramount to almost double the effort at healthy communication, with keeping people informed about what's happening, what they can do, how they can be involved, how they can support this, what do they do with their questions, where do they go with their concerns. All of that stuff is critical, and when change gets imposed and people get silenced, we're in trouble big time with transition. Okay, others? There's plenty of others where things go excitingly wrong, spectacularly wrong.
The reinstitution of old politics.
Yes, yeah. Institution. I saw this happen just the other day in a church. Minister transitioned out, and many of the traditional leaders just rubbed their hands and said, "All right, back to the old way," And so they just saw this as an opportunity straight to reassert themselves. Yep. Other things in here that go wrong.
What I was going to say was similar to that, but I was was going to express it more as unresolved past issues
Yep.
resurfacing.
Yes.
If the last leader, kept it all sort of under wraps or
Yeah.
calm during their tenure,
Yeah.
then suddenly when that leader's gone, it all comes back.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So some things that actually haven't changed, they've just gone quiet. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Buried conflict. Yep.
When it's rushed,
Yes. Yeah.
which at some point is going to be held as a piece of string, because
Yes.
if it's rushed to someone, it's forever.
Exactly. That's right. And we'll in the Bridges model, we'll talk about the pacing of change and the different ways that people operate. Some people are highly change oriented; they love it, and they're on the bandwagon straight away. And others are naturally change resistant, and they almost try to immunise themselves and everybody else against change. And so we've just got to work with both parties. Yep. Other things that don't go well.
When people won't get involved in the process, or they
Yeah.
potentially seek to just upset the process,
Yeah.
the sabotage.
Yes. Yep. Yep. We get both of those. The resistors and then the saboteurs. People who take great delight in blowing something up somewhere, in the process, just to stop it. Okay, others? There's probably a few more classics in here that just seem to.
You can get stuck
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
You don't want to rush it, you don't want to get stuck in it.
Yeah. Particularly if you've got an element of a process that's dependent on a particular person or particular action that gets blocked for some reason, and that's stopping everything else from being implemented. It can be very frustrating for
When
people
conflicts
involved.
aren't acknowledged,
Yes. Yeah.
but in terms of your relationships,
Yep.
with a fixed relationship in order to go forward,
Yes. Yeah.
unless everyone's together on this thing, it's never going to work.
Mm-hmm. Conflict and transition are partners. There's always conflict in transition, so that's partly one of the areas we have to work on.
Lack of clarity around the goal.
Yeah. Yep. So when people can't see where we're going, what we're doing, and maybe often why we are doing this.
Or when it gets changed.
Yes.
Really
Yeah.
of course as well.
Yep.
Where some situations where it can change 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Look where we're going here.
Yeah. One of the features of conflict, of change, is that the situation, when it resolves to become the new, is never exactly what anybody planned. It's always slightly different, without fail. And so managing that is a critical element, because there's always one of the things when you change a system, destabilise a system, it's never going to be exactly what you anticipate at the other end. And so the ability to manage the unexpected in any change transformation process is really critical. And so there's always a little bit of confusion in there. That's part of the course, and it's part of having to manage that.
Isn't this one of the good things about transition, is actually leaving space for God and
Yeah.
the Spirit to work? And
Yep.
one of the dangers is trying to control it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Having a predetermined outcome.
Yep.
You're going to impose over top of the system.
Yes. That's right. Yep. Yep.
When it's an inappropriate person leading that change,
Yes.
like the previous pastor,
Yeah.
who's just resigned.
Yes. That's right. Yes. Yeah.
Come back 2 weeks later
As
as the
yes.
interim
Yeah.
the lead transition.
Yeah. Yeah.
True story.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yeah. We'll spend a bit of time on this today, but one of the tricky things about change management and transition is that there are 3 very distinct styles of leadership required at different moments of change in this, and they're very rarely found in the same person, very rarely. And so when we talk about the initialising the change, you need visionary leadership, which is somebody who can almost prophetically point out what's wrong, what needs to happen, inspire people to have the courage to move out and change. They are not always the most pastoral of people, which is what is needed at the next moment when people have actually embraced the fact that they're going to have to change. All of a sudden they start realising the downside, that roles are going to be lost, things are going to be different, it's not going to be quite the same, I'm not going to have my parking place. All these sort of things are going to change, you know, the pews are going to move, where I've sat for 50 years is not going to be the same. All of that, this is pastoral care, you know, 101, and often the person who's led the change is not the best to offer the pastoral care. And when you're embedding then the new and you're out coming through the other side, people are accepting the change, you need a level of managerial sophistication to help find people the new jobs, organise the new parking spots, train the new people, assign everybody to jobs, equip them, train them, support them, encourage them, which is a different type of leadership. Again, it's kind of training / equipping / managing / people organisation. It's almost like a PR job, you know, not public relations, but what is it? Personnel management job. Yeah, HR. That's what I was thinking of. It's helping fit people to tasks, roles, jobs, training, equipping. It's settling stuff in. And again, often the visionary person and the pastoral person don't have that skill set. And so it's often the best change management groups are teams of people that have thought about the skill set required for the 3 different tasks involved in change. That's one of the reasons it's so complex as a leadership issue, is that people don't get the different leadership tasks that are there. So William Bridges, I think he's got a Christian background. He's got a whole section in his book on the children of Israel in the wilderness. I've copied a bit into our notes for later today. But I think he oversteps the mark a little bit in his exegesis of the passages. But he basically argues that Moses had 2 of those leadership qualities and not the 3rd, which was why he never got into the promised land. Now, I think there might have been other reasons. I think there might have been other reasons like striking the rock and a few other things that were at play in there. But I mean, it's just interesting what he says. His observation is that Moses didn't have the managerial leadership style. He was much more of a prophetic, you know, let's charge out and do it. Let's set the new rules. Let's put the 10 Commandments in place in the neutral time, you know, the rethinking time, remaking the people. He was good at getting the people out. He was good at managing them through the wilderness, but he couldn't take them into the promised land. Now, I'm not sure that's because he hadn't read William Bridges' book on management. I think there might be other factors going on there, but we'll have a yak about that anyway. All right, other thoughts?
Just on that, Tim, I've been thinking about that from a church planning perspective.
Yeah.
Capitalising something new, so the need for apostles and prophets and evangelists.
Yes.
Starting stage, but for a church plan to transition healthy, they then need a pastor.
Yes.
Teacher.
Yeah.
And then to then multiply, you then need an apostle, prophet.
It's just, yes, that's right.
Just thinking about church plant
yep.
life cycles and even church life cycles, and what are the functions that come to the fore?
Yes,
seasons.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's mirrored in the time of transition too. When there's a significant transition going on for a church, you do need very different styles of leadership. So that prophet apostolic kind of leadership is often the kind that is outward focused, gets a change on the cards, gets it on the board, but often they're not the best at actually helping people through that process of change. Okay.
Spiritual letdown when they don't get the first pastor that they really wanted.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
get the top role. I don't know how to put it exactly.
Yeah. It's actually dealing with disappointment, and there are all kinds of different forms of losses that people have to deal with in situations, and it may be loss of an expectation, loss of what things happen, of what's going to happen. Dealing with that becomes a really significant issue.
more than disappointment, it can be a real hurt for a lack of trust. I've seen a few transitions where the pastor left at the last minute to say he was going.
Yes.
But it became clear to people that he'd been thinking about it for a long time and he had an agenda and he was waiting for certain circumstances to come about.
Yeah.
As soon as he was right, he was gone.
Yes. Yeah.
And everybody felt a bit betrayed because
Yes.
they thought he was investing in them. And
Yes.
it turns out they realised that he wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So there was a real hurt left behind.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that connects to lack of honesty.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So I have to start with John 8:32.
Yes.
Truth sets us
Three.
free.
Yeah.
Sometimes truth
It's painful. Yeah. Yep.
One of the things I've seen is when we're faced with difficult decisions, people can sometimes default from a place of fear to the
Yes.
safe option.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Retreat back to what we know.
Yeah. And that's where you really need that inspirational leader to help people be willing to take a risk for God in doing something which maybe they haven't done before. That's different. That's new. Okay, we're happy to just let that sit. Let's just have a. I think we're going to go for morning tea about 10:30. So let's just dive in. This is William Bridges' material. I'll pop it up. We'll just step our way through it here, and it'll be. It's not in. It's. I don't think I haven't. These are PowerPoint slides, so we haven't just printed them all out. But they are all in the Dropbox as a couple of PowerPoints. There's a cut down version that you can use to teach to others, and there's a kind of fuller version that I'll go through with you here. So we'll pop that up. Stay with it all, and we will just walk through. Okay, so this is all based on William Bridges' book. Can I encourage you, if you've not got a copy, you can get plenty of copies on Kindle or other places. I think it's in its 3rd or 4th edition now. I was just interested, the guy that I'm actually coaching through a transition at the moment, he turned up to stay 2 days with us, Monday, Tuesday this week, while I was training him for some future work he's going to be doing in Queensland. And the first thing he pulled out of his briefcase and put on the table was William Bridges' book on transition. And I said, "Oh, you've gone and grabbed it." He said, "Yep, absolute goldmine." And so can I encourage you, that's a really good one to have, a good one here maybe to have in the library. It's considered, it's getting a little dated now in some ways, but it's still considered a classic. William Bridges, I think it's just called Transition, it might be the full title.
Transitions Making Sense of Life.
Yep, that's the one. And what's edition is it now? Third or fourth?
Anniversary copy.
Yeah, that's one. Anniversary copy, okay.
$16 on Kindle.
Yeah.
It's on Audible.
Yeah. It was kind of a landmark book, and people all over the world have been commenting on it, reflecting on it. It's all been updated, I think, for its anniversary edition or whatever it is now. So it's just a good one to know, and certainly the theory in it is very sound. So what Bridges identified in here, which was kind of the landmark thing, is that we all talk about change. Change is an event. It's the way things are actually going to be different. If you like here, the shift between the tangible externals of a situation, and it's fairly event-driven. So often the change will take place at a fairly short period of time. That last Sunday we did it this way, next Sunday we're going to be doing it this way. So it often happens quickly, it's defined, it's fairly definite. Transition is the psycho-spiritual process that people go through in adjusting to that change. So it's the feelings they have about that change. So it's how they move through the processes of accepting it or adjusting to it. It's the kind of the processes that people have as they say goodbye to a loss around one, and they actually embrace the way of doing things. It takes significant time, and we know that people work through various phases of adjustment to those things. So he was the one who said, as change is an event, transition is a psychological process. And the ability to adjust to the event is dependent on how well you pastor and care for people through the process. And if you stuff the process up, you'll actually end up making a mess of the event. And so the two things need to be done together. Now this is a little different to bridges. I've just popped this one in here because as we've worked in situations, we realise that not all changes are the same. Some are really easy to cope with because if they are a natural part of the life and growth of the church, an anticipated normal life cycle transition. So sometimes this is decline, but most of the time it's a natural leadership. We all know pastors come and go in the lives of churches. So it's actually, even though it's painful and it hurts, it's a natural change that people anticipate. But people don't stay forever. Churches sometimes grow. We lose the sense of intimacy we had as a small group. Sometimes larger churches shrink in size and we come back to a different way of functioning. We can't support the youth pastor that we've always had in the life of the church any longer. Now, those things are still what we call NATs, natural anticipated transitions. They are a part of normal life, and people, if they stop and think, can see them coming. So, I mean, most of us who are in our 40s, 50s, 60s in life are looking down the track at our parents becoming less, having less capacities, and eventually they will pass away. That's a natural transition in life. It's hard when it happens, but all of us know we know how life works. We see this coming. It's a transition that we know that we will work with. Guy I was with earlier this week, again, he buried his mum last week. So he's dealing with two transitions at once, essentially. It's leaving ministry, moving into something new, and also for the first time being without his mother. And so that's a significant transition, but it's natural and it's anticipated. So we cope with that in a different way than we cope with some of the other forms of transition. Some of the others are intentional, but they're driven by vision. And so this is actually, a change here in the way we do church. It's not necessarily a natural change, but we've now got a vision to replace programs with discipleship. So we actually have a vision-driven a change that's going to happen in the life of the church. Or we decide to become intentionally more outward-focused in our church. And so this is driven by vision. So it's visionary leadership. We call these VET transitions, visionary energised transitions, and they're different to the natural processes because they have kind of the core, the intentionality, and the way that people have accepted vision as a core part of them. Then we have the FATs, the forced adjustments. These are the unwelcome transitions, the ones that aren't quite as happy. So mergers, closures, big demographic changes, some leadership changes, which are forced by external circumstances that people are not keen on, they're not happy about. And so, the gentrification of a whole area of the city, which moves a traditional group of people out of that area, the change in the demographics of a suburb, shifting country towns. So I've had to work in areas of rural Queensland over recent years where the big mining companies, the fracking companies have come in, and as the company enters the town, all of a sudden people in the local town can no longer afford the rental housing because the rental housing market is totally taken up by company employees. So all of the local people that have lived in the rental areas of the town are forced out of the town. They can no longer afford to live there. And so it actually changes the dynamic of the town. The construction phase of the mine is about 2 to 2.5 years. So in 2 to 2.5 years, it all changes. All of the people that are in the town leave, and the skeleton staff running the mine is left. But in the meantime, the town has totally transformed, and new people own the houses, the market has shifted, local people can't come back to what they used to have, and the town people tell me, and the people who are running the churches, that in that 2.5 year period, everything has to adjust and change, and at the end we don't get back what we lost. And so it's actually quite painful for people dealing with the pastoral side of that reality. And so these are forced adjustment changes due to demographic shifts that occur in the life of the community. Then the last one, we have the CRITs, the critical issues. These are the crisis-induced transformations. So a major issue in a church, a death, critical incident, a fire, a flood, something that takes away the church building, something that takes away church leadership. Very significant issues that can actually cause major transformation and changes in churches. And again, the way we deal with those is slightly nuanced and different because of the type of transition involved. So just a quick around the room. What was the last transition that you were a part of? Which one of these was that? Kevin?
As of yesterday, FAT.
A FAT? Okay, all right. So a forced adjustment as of yesterday. Yep. Just very quickly?
B and I were with a group who the church is closing in 10 days' time, and they were the ones who left who weren't members and didn't want to close.
Okay, yeah, right. Yep, okay. So forced adjustment. Yeah. Let's get going. What's the most recent? Which kind?
I'm helping with a NAT at the moment, actually.
Okay, yep. Natural change? Yeah. Yep. And what's the
Our pastor is, can't remember who it is, announced it to the church yet, but it's planning on finishing up.
Okay,
And,
yes.
so I'm on a group that was using to advise them through that process.
Great. Yeah, good. Good. Okay.
Yeah, would be a Matt.
Yeah.
One of our pastors moved to a new church.
Yes.
And so we're currently recruiting a replacement.
Yeah. Okay. Natural transition. Yep. Great. Yep.
Yeah, we've got a nat with someone who's left.
Okay.
Leading.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm part of it. I hope I am.
Yes. Yep. 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 Good.
I don't think I'll say anything.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yep.
I'll leave it.
All right. That's fair enough. Yep.
Is that all right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Totally.
We're doing a vet at the moment with looking at planting a church. We vote on that this Sunday.
Right. Okay. Yep. Yep. Okay.
Celebrate 150 group.
Hope you're enjoying the meeting.
Forced to adjust.
That was the fact.
For me, a vet, I'm mentoring a young pastor
Yeah.
who's just started, well, in the last 12 months, started a small church, and he's trying to
Vision.
and change
Yeah.
and try to mentor him alongside, walk with him on that.
Yeah. Yep. Good.
And Nat, we've just had an associate.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Yes. Yep. Good.
Probably all of the above, but I can think of the fat.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. Any comment on it?
Probably not.
No. Okay. Yes. Yep. Good.
Confidential, but
Yes. Sure. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Good.
you already know. You're in the fat with me. New slogan. No, it's not. No, it's not. The church might be offended when we say that too.
Yeah. Sure. Yes. Yeah.
I think our church is still suffering from a fat that happened many years ago.
Okay. Right. Yep. Yep. Good.
So evangelism, I would like to think is in the vision passage.
Yes. Yeah.
But it could also be forced adjustment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have no love for it either.
Yep. Yep. Good.
All of them.
Yes.
I was with Kev yesterday
Yeah.
for the
For the FAT.
fat,
Yeah.
too fat. But then I went from Kev's to last night to a vet.
Okay. That's good. Yeah.
Well, actually, yesterday we had the crit and the FAT.
Yes.
One after each other.
Yeah.
A vet just had a meeting a week and a half ago looking at where our church is going, trying to
Yes.
develop a vision.
Yes.
Talking about our location, vision,
Yeah.
all behind the fence, how we're going to move in the community.
Yeah.
So very exciting.
Yeah, good. So I think you can see from this the transition stuff going on in each of these is quite different because of the way the whole thing kicks or starts or what's happening. So the pastoral side can be a significant kind of process in there. All right, so just we'll go to this next slide first and then come back to this one. Go back. This is the model. Oh, it's not. Sorry, could you see all that before, or was that I was?
Yeah, we've lost that side.
We've lost that side. What's happening there? Just let me see if I can. It's the resolution of the projector, isn't it? No, it's the. Is it the resolution of the projector? Well, okay.
So two sizes that it comes in.
Still trying to impress. Nobody else did that.
Resolution, multiple displays.
Most people who never used a PowerPoint like that, but anyway. Do you have someone that builds your PowerPoints, Phil?
What's PowerPoint?
If I show. No, is that going to, no, revert. No input is detected. Oh, yeah.
Actually, it keeps this on whiteboard again anyway. We'll come back to it. We use the paper where you flip it over.
Yeah,
It
flip
just
it up,
sounds
yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah, you got retro. Actually, yeah, I've seen good powers do it really well. The passes come from the last year. Really clear one. Oh, no. It's just, okay,
No, that's not right. Extend the display. Oh, size tips.
I couldn't read it. I'm just out of it though. That's all right.
Okay. Yeah, I've got that one off the screen. All right, two different screens. Let's just see if we can get that one back up. No, I've got the wrong side.
Do you want to borrow my Mac?
You're it should let's just try that again. Start from the no, it's going the wrong way. Close the window. I'll just restart that, just see whether we can get it flicking out right.
The whole screen, isn't it?
Yeah, for some reason it hasn't picked up the resolution of the projector. And so I wasn't watching the screen behind me. I could see it was all fine on mine.
Yeah, you're right. It's not just actually the.
Tim, before when you had what it looks like when you're working, we could see it fine.
Yeah.
So if you just open PowerPoint
Yeah.
and don't put it in display mode, we can see the whole.
The whole thing?
Yeah.
All right, so we won't do that.
See,
All right.
that's easier to know. It's 16 by 9.
Just see if I can make that work. I'm not actually running that on PowerPoint, so we'll try. Here we go. Oh, that's not right. I can't. I'm going to rearrange the displays. Does anybody use this projector regularly? Is that the right resolution for that projector?
Try the, did you try the one below it? Yeah, that one? Yep.
That's a very unusual one. That should be, that's normally... Not sure why it's all coming up on this screen. Sorry, I'm just moving all this back onto this other screen here. I'm not sure why that's all gone. Okay, here we go.
You don't do these on overhead transparencies, do you?
I wish.
We've got it on our phones and our laptops if you want that.
Yeah, no, it's all right. I'll just pull this up. Okay. Give that one more try if we fail this time. Yeah, so I'm not sure why that's gone. Whatever I've done, I've turned the screens around so they're coming up on this. Yeah, exactly right. I don't normally have this. This is why I always bring my own. I thought I'll use this one this time. Let's just go here. Are you happy just to work off this sheet, off the screen? You can see it. Okay. All right. I can't see it, but we'll do it. Okay. Here we go. William Bridges' model of transition. Just to walk this through, this is the timeline under here. And so at any one timeline is, if you take a section through, you've got the proportion of people that are dealing with the various tasks of transition. And so here, timeline through here at the early parts, most of the people are struggling with letting go of the old. You've got a few people that are in the greys are the transitional issues that people are doing as they go through the grief and loss of adjusting to the neutral zone, which is actually, he argues, an intentionally disengaged zone where you're not committed to the past and you're not yet committed to the new, but this is the time for, as we saw in Paul's passage, the mental readjustment, the headspace. So he says it's no accident that the 10 commandments, which were to reshape the nation of Israel, were given in the wilderness, not as soon as they entered the promised land, because you actually had to rework the mind in the neutral zone. Does that make sense? So there's significant things that happen. The neutral zone is not nothing happening. It's actually significant mental change that is going on that's going to allow you to embrace the new in a different way. But you can't do that when you're invested in the old, and you can't do it as you are getting the new, because it actually undergirds what's happening in the new. So it's an important zone to go through. But you'll have a few people in there. You'll have a few people that are adjusting psychologically in the grey zone to the new. And then you always have a few people that they are right up there with you. They've made this adjustment. They're right there from the word go in the new zone. Does that make sense? So this is through here. Come down here in the transitional period, and you'll have, say, a much smaller group of people letting go, some in the psychological adjustment, a whole lot of people in the neutral zone, smaller number of people making the adjustment, and an slowly increasing number of people that have got the new. Down here where we've just about got the change adjusted, smaller number of people who've never going to let go. Yeah. So basically, if they don't adjust to the new, they will probably eventually leave the system. They won't change. Few people making the adjustment, much smaller number of people now in the neutral zone, few still adjusting here, and quite a lot of people in the green zone having made the adjustment. So this is the journey here for any individual person up here. So some people start up here in the green, and they, they're there right from the word go. They don't need any adjustment. They're right with you. They've actually done the work themselves previously. Other people start here, takes them a little bit of time to get to here, bit of time through this zone, quite a lot of time in the neutral zone, here, bit of adjustment, and then they're there into the change. So the journey for that person over time might be like that. For some other people, long time before they let go, then they have quite a long adjustment, then a time in here, and maybe a fairly short adjustment till they get over to here. So it can vary for every individual person. And part of the challenge of leading people through is you've got people at all different stages at different points of the time. And so here you may have a significant, through the centre, significant number of people that are significantly in the neutral zone, and we're caring for, pastoring, teaching, training them in order to get them to embrace the new at the other. So this is kind of the bubble in the middle that he talks about. And he talks about a couple of key trajectory changes. So the moment here where the number of people moving out of the old into the neutral zone increases significantly is an important time for the church. So that's often the moment where the vision really starts to impact significant groups of people, when you have a shift in the rate of people moving from one into the other. And also the shift down here and here, where the number of people moving out of the neutral zone to engage the new vastly increases. So when this becomes a steep line here, like this steep line here, which is the rate of change, the rate of people moving out of one zone into the other increases, is significant. So if this becomes really steep and you've got a lot of people moving at once out of the neutral zone and engaging the new, being trained up, committing themselves, finding the pathway forward, that's a significant moment in the life of a church. So this is just what they call the bridges model. You'll see, if you dial this up on the internet, you'll find all kinds of slightly nuanced versions of this. But it's all about the old, the neutral and the new, and the rate of change over a community of people. So have most of you seen this before? This is new for most people? Okay.
Lots of us seen the diagram, so they're familiar with that.
Yeah, okay. I will often draw this diagram up for a church and talk about, we'll actually discuss what is it here that we have to let go of, what are the challenges of letting go things, what things might we need to do just in this neutral zone, how much time do we need to allow for the church to process things here, and it's what new thinking needs to go in, what new things need to be put in place in order that we can actually effectively embrace the new. Because you can't just go bing from one to the other. The neutral zone is actually quite important, and it's a zone where people actually disengage themselves with their investment in the past, so they can actually spiritually and psychologically invest in the new as quite significant.
Is there an average timeline?
Yeah.
I know other factors will...
Yeah, so a lot of people say you can't do this in under 9 months, but sometimes it's years.
Does Bridges overlay that with the level of trust in the leader or the leadership team?
Yeah.
I think back to Moses, and Moses was relatively new as a leader in Israel when they got to the promised land, and they all said, no, there's giants in there.
Yeah, that's right, we can't.
But over there, Joshua had been with them for 40 years in the
Yes, that's right, exactly, yes.
I don't know whether Bridges makes any comment on that. Well, I've found in our context where there's tenure and trust,
yep,
that can actually help with the embracing.
Definitely,
and even,
totally.
Even in the neutral zone, people are going, well, all right, we trust our leadership team, we've trusted them before, and,
yep,
and they haven't,
yes, yeah, yeah. So I think trust is critical to each step of this, but the way in which trust is mediated to the group is different in each way. And so the trust in the visionary leader to actually to get this curve here right, so that people start to let go. We're going somewhere. We don't actually understand exactly what it looks like. We can't. No one can quite spell it out. But we realise that we can't stay where we are. We accept this vision or the direction or the need for change. We're going to do this. Then getting through the neutral zone. When people leave this, there's grief and loss in here. And there is a little bit of time in the wilderness, and that's normal. One of the gifts that Bridges, I think, offers us in this is don't cut the wilderness short. He's not suggesting 40 years, I think, but he says that we all actually need a period of time where we actually have to have our thinking reshaped in this zone so that we're in a position to be able to embrace the new. And again, I think he would argue that if you try to go directly from here to here, this never embeds itself well, because people have not actually worked out what's going to be different and how am I going to do this and what thinking needs to be in place in here to be different. And so that way he would say it was so crucial for the children of Israel in leaving behind the idolatry of Egypt, the fact that they didn't even know the name of God. They didn't know how to worship God. They needed this whole opportunity to create a new culture with a new set of laws and a new way of doing things before they were able to enter in to the future, and that was absolutely vital and necessary. Because in this situation, God was creating a new nation. It wasn't just, get out of Egypt and go and do the same thing in the Promised Land. You're actually going to do something brand new and different in the Promised. You're going to be a new people, a different people with a different ethical, spiritual, liturgical code of the way in which you're going to operate as a people. It's going to be very different to your old way. And so for that reason, we needed to disengage before we could come to the new. So if we just go back to, here we go, 2 slides I think back here. This one. These are colour coded. So the purple is the neutral zone. The 2 greys are the psychology, the spiritual transitional moments, and then this is the old and this is the new. So to leave the old, people need to accept the need and the reality of the change. They need to understand the nature of their losses. So there's lots of Bridges talks about the unlocking, the releasing processes, the separation, the endings, and vision is also needed to actually get people out of that period. Then you've got just the complex emotions of grief and loss in leading this. So this afternoon we'll talk this through, but one of the exercises I actually work through with pastors sometimes is we put a timeline of all the key moments of transition on the floor that a pastor's looking at. So the moment when they'll have their last Sunday in their church, they might be having a couple of weeks of holiday break and other things are happening in the moment when they start in the new. I put them out on the floor, and then as part of the process of adjustment, I invite the pastor to walk the journey. And I did this recently with a person leaving the executive directorship of a Christian organisation, and he got to this point, and I asked him to actually say the words, "I am no longer the national director of this particular organisation," and he burst out in tears, and he said, "I've never realised the loss that I'm going to feel at that moment." Now, this was a healthy transition. He'd done a great job. He was working, and he was moving into something new that was really healthy. But all of a sudden, he said, "I've suddenly, just for the first time, I'm coming to grips with what I'm actually stepping out of." And so these are the emotional processes of grief and loss, and people have to have that. Without that, it catches them by surprise down the track. So it was actually helpful for him to process this ahead of time so that he had the chance to realise what he was going to actually experience. Then there's this kind of confusion, disorientation, disengagement of the neutral phase. So I've got a guy I'm working with right at the moment. He's right in the middle of the neutral phase, and he said to me just the other day, he said, "I've got no idea what I'm doing with my life right now." Now he's going to something really exciting and really new, but it's not going to start, for a bit. But he was just actually saying to me, I'm in limbo land, I'm nowhere. It's strange that I don't have to preach on Sunday. Strange that all the rhythms that informed my life are suddenly gone, and there's disorientation involved in all of that, and that's a good thing, because in this neutral period, he's going to have to rework some new rhythms and disciplines that are going to happen down the track. But you've got to actually be able to let go of the others to start off with. So this, and Bridges insists, and I think he's absolutely right, that this is actually a really important phase. We shouldn't hurry it. Neither should we. You don't want to spend 40 years in it because you didn't have the vision to step into the Promised Land at the right time. But neither do you want to cut it short to say that it's not important, because this moment of disconnect is actually quite significant. Then you've got the adjustment to the new, working out the new roles, the new relationships, the new processes, dealing with the unexpected realities in the new situation, and then comes the moment of investing emotionally in the new situation. So you become committed, you become engaged, you reintegrate. This is beginnings and new energy that comes out of making the new one work. But these three become the important ones in that process. Does that make sense? One other little slide before we break for morning tea. This one here on the edge. Just being aware, in here, these again are colour coordinated. Purple is the neutral zone, greys are the two psychological adjustments, red what we leave, green what we embrace. It looks really different for different people, right? Some people are straight away in the neutral zone, pretty quick adjustment, and they're right into the new, very, very quickly. Other people take a long time to leave the old and then do a fairly short adjustment. Some people get out of the old, adjust, get stuck in the neutral zone, and never get into the new. And so pastorally, we can be dealing with people. If you run a line through here, you're dealing with people in every different stage at the same time. And that's just the difficult reality of managing change, is that you've still got people who are ringing up and they haven't let go of the old yet. They're fighting to hold on to some element of the old. At the same time as you've got some people who can't understand why we haven't got all this stuff in place. You know, what's going on here? We all agreed to this change. It should be done yesterday. What's going on here? We're just marking time. We're wasting time. We should have this all happening and happening tomorrow. And so there's just differences in here, and taking the appropriate amount of time to tend people's own personal journeys, particularly the grey stuff, which is the psychologically challenging areas, is really critically important. Now, have I confused you all enough for the morning? Yeah. Just interact. What are your thoughts, reflections as you sit with this? This is William Bridges' stuff, and I think it's some of the best. Who's got a thought?
Yes.
Good.
Change is a complex human problem.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
I think sometimes that we're all in various different transitional parts at various times. Family.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Time we might be going through.
Yes.
So we can be in different.
Absolutely.
Process times according to whatever thing we're looking at.
Yep. Yep. And can I say here, in terms of those of you who work with mentoring pastors, managing multiple changes at once is highly problematic. So one of the things that my own mentor did with me, which was very helpful, is he was looking at what was going to be happening for me in a couple of years over a period, and he said, Tim, you've got major change coming up in family as your kids transition, in terms of school. You've got some major changes coming up with my wife, who was wanting to leave one medical way of doing things and set up her own medical practice. You've got a major change coming up for yourself. He said, you're going to go under if you try to manage all these three at once. So he said, my suggestion is family one is non-negotiable in terms of its time. We need to manage that one as a priority. Then let's work out the best time for your wife to transition, and we're going to put off your personal transition for a year, because it doesn't have to happen straight away. You can do what you're doing for another year before we change anything there, because that's a choice we've got, and it will be far healthier for you, your family, for everybody else if we do it that way. And I don't think I ever got better advice. Because there were some of the other things over which we had choice, some things over which we didn't.
So someone going through a transition such as retiring,
yes,
would be logically stressed about that.
Absolutely.
And stressed about whatever's happening in church transition.
Yes, yep.
So do you back off them, or do you play safe, or because that's a large bunch of my congregation just at the moment.
Yes.
They're all retiring at once, all becoming grey nomads.
Okay, yeah.
Which actually alleviates a lot of problems because they'll all go away.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
They do, they keep coming back.
Yes, that's right. Yes, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely.
So they're a bunch of people you won't expect to transition particularly well because of their other stresses.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. So, and people underestimate the transition that retirement is. Retirement is a massive transition in life, huge, and some people just think I can cope with this. It's not really, it's all positive. It's not really a major change. But the loss of identity and role and a whole range of things is quite significant. And sometimes for many couples, this is the first time they've actually had to spend a lot of time together. There's another major change, you know, and that sometimes looks like a dream from one side, but it's not, doesn't work out quite that much of a dream on the other side of it all. Yeah. Okay, we're up to morning tea time. Is that okay? Morning tea's all right? Okay, let's just take a quick break, and because we're going to drill down into, I want to work on what's called the critical few after morning tea. These couple of key elements of change, which apparently, and I've certainly seen it work, make change a lot more successful if they can be put into place.